A month earlier they'd lost the house. When they could no longer make the payments, and neither Gary or Misha could find a job, one of the neighbors called social services to see why the kids weren't going to school. They swallowed their pride and called every relative they had. When they'd heard all the sorries they could stomach, they packed their things and moved into the car. The kids were so good, and so understanding, that Gary and Misha cried that first night. Watching the kids sleep in the back seat, in their cartoon sleeping bags, Gary and Misha swore to the gods that night. They swore they would do everything to keep their kids safe, to make a better life for them. Maybe they couldn't give them much, but it would be better than sleeping in the back of a car meant for repossession, parked in the lot of a stalled construction site. Then the day happened. The day of impossible colors. They were spending more and more time at the shelter with tents erected in the back. The people there were nice, and gave them food without asking questions. The kids even made a few friends, older kids who were sweet to them and let them use their old phone. They were just lining up for dinner when the sky shook and vibrated with the brightest colors any of them had seen. One of the older men, a veteran, screamed like his past was catching up to him, like they'd finally found him, and he ran inside and trembled under a serving table. The rest of them watched the shaking sky with open-mouthed awe, holding hands when they remembered to, a few of them crying. Then came the sound of cars crashing. Fire licked the trees and buildings twisted like spinal columns mangled by bone disease. A woman in one of the tents emerged shouting, holding a pile of ashes in a blanket, her skin shimmering like beetle flesh, her tongue turned to flies, her hair blowing off in the wind, and finally, just before the end, smiling at them all. Gary and Misha grabbed the kids and ran hard as the town around them evolved into something new, and they didn't stop running until they reached the woods, hoping to hide from whatever was happening in the embrace of the trees. Nothing happened for a while, and they calmed the kids and wiped the tears from their faces. Later that night Gary left them there in the woods to salvage one of the tents from the shelter. They didn't trust buildings after they'd seen what some of the buildings become. Gary stepped over flowers and ashes to take down one of the tents as quietly as he could, shooing flies from his mouth. He hid under a car from a woman made of reaching fingers, the fingernails made of light. She burned brightly in the night and he shut his eyes hoping her light wouldn't infect him. When he got back to the woods where he'd left Misha and the children, they were gone. He dropped the tent and ran to the tree where they'd found shelter, but there was no sign of them. Instead he found a door in the floor. It was dark brown and made of wood, but no wood found in the trees there. It had a handle of worn-down brass. He thought for a moment if he should go back into the town and find something he could use, a flashlight or a gun, but he decided against it in case he ran into the woman of fingers and light. Gary opened the door in the floor. It was dark down there, without stairs or ladder or light. He took a breath and climbed down.